It was a cold, quiet morning, the kind where the chill gets deep in your bones under a grey, unforgiving sky. On the side of a slick, wet road, a woman named Emma walked with purpose. Her cleaner's uniform was worn thin from countless washes, but it was spotless, which showed just how much pride she took in her work. She was just trying to get to her job, a simple goal for what should have been a simple day. But in one cruel, deliberate moment, a splash of mud would change her entire life. A gleaming luxury car, black and polished, came speeding down the road. The driver didn't have to swerve. They didn't have to aim for the huge, murky puddle sitting by the curb like a trap. But they did. With a sharp turn of the wheel, the car plunged through the dirty water, sending a tidal wave of cold brown sludge exploding onto the sidewalk. It drenched Emma from her shoulders down to her worn-out shoes. A sudden, shocking shower of filth. Through the car's tinted window, a woman's face, framed by expensive sunglasses, looked out. She wasn't horrified. She wasn't sorry. She was laughing. A cruel, mocking laugh that cut through the quiet morning air. Then the car sped off, leaving Emma standing alone, shivering and humiliated. But the woman who mocked her had no idea that someone powerful was watching, someone who saw the entire thing. What would you have done in that moment? What would you do if you saw that happen? Let's dive into the unimaginable events that followed this single, heartless act. To really get why that moment was so humiliating, you have to understand a little bit about Emma's life. Emma was more than just a cleaner. She was a single mom and a fortress of resilience, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her days started long before the sun came up and ended long after it went down. She worked 2 jobs, scrubbing floors and polishing windows in the city's huge office buildings. Her hands raw, but her spirit strong. Her whole world was a tiny 2-room apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up. It was a place full of problems, the constant drip of a leaky faucet, the wallpaper that peeled in the summer humidity, the cold draft that whistled through the windows in winter. Still, it was a home filled with a quiet kind of love. Every spare coin, every last drop of her energy went to her 7-year-old son, Leo. He was her entire world. Leo's biggest dream wasn't a fancy toy or a new video game. It was a new pair of sneakers. The soles of his current pair were worn all the way through, a fact he tried to hide by stuffing cardboard inside them. But Emma knew. A mother always knows. And the thought of that cardboard was a constant, dull ache in her heart. She often skipped lunch, telling Leo she'd eaten at work, just to save a few more dollars. Her own hunger pangs were nothing compared to the deep ache of wanting to give her son one small thing that other people seem to get so easily. Despite all the hardship, Emma's heart had no room for bitterness. She was just a fundamentally kind and dignified person. She was the type to leave a small bowl of milk on her windowsill for the neighborhood stray, even when her own fridge was nearly bare. She always had a warm good morning for her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, and would often carry the woman's groceries up all 4 flights of stairs. She had this little phrase she'd whisper to herself when things got tough. Dignity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you give it away. So, when that wave of cold, foul-smelling mud hit her, it was so much more than just water and dirt. It was like the world's indifference had turned into a physical thing, hitting her all at once. It was a slap in the face from a universe that seemed to reward cruelty and look down on decency. For a long moment, she just stood there as the shock turned into a hot, stinging wave of shame. Her first thought was of her uniform. She'd spent an hour the night before ironing it perfectly. Now, it was ruined. Her second thought was of the laughter. That sound, so full of spite and amusement, cut deeper than the cold. But Emma didn't cry. She wouldn't scream or curse the sky. That would be giving away a piece of her dignity, and she refused. Instead, she took a deep, shuddering breath that burned her lungs. With as much composure as she could find, she walked to a small park nearby and found a public water fountain. There, with shaking hands and chattering teeth, she began to clean herself. She used coarse paper towels from the public restroom to scrub at the mud, her movements focused and deliberate. She wasn't just cleaning her uniform, she was scrubbing away the humiliation, refusing to let it sink into her soul. She was late for work and she knew she'd get in trouble, but she would not walk in defeated. She would walk in with her head held high, a queen in a soiled uniform, miles away, in a world that might as well have been another planet. Isabella Beaumont stepped out of her black luxury car, the sound of her own laughter still fresh in her mind. She walked into a mansion that wasn't a home so much as a monument to wealth. White marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and priceless art hung on silk-covered walls. She tossed her keys onto a glass table with a clatter that echoed in the huge, empty foyer. Her first act wasn't to feel grateful for her life, but to complain. She immediately called her friend, her voice just dripping with glee. "Clarice, you will not believe what just happened," she said, sinking into a velvet sofa. There was this cleaner walking on the side of the road. She looked so pathetic in her little grey uniform. So I thought, let's give her something to really be miserable about. She told her what happened, her story punctuated by these sharp, cruel laughs. You should have seen her face, just shocked, like a drowned rat. It absolutely made my morning. Isabella's life was a tapestry of privilege and boredom. Her day was just a long list of pointless complaints. She whined that the foam on her morning cappuccino, made by her personal chef, wasn't airy enough. She found a microscopic scuff on a $5,000 handbag and declared her day ruined. She didn't ask her staff for things, she commanded them, her tone laced with a condescension that made them feel invisible. To her, they weren't people. They were just functions, tools to make her life effortless. Her massive wealth wasn't something she'd earned. She had married into it. Her husband, Richard Beaumont, was a titan of industry, a man whose name meant power and success. But he was a ghost, in their own home, always swallowed by his work, leaving Isabella to rattle around in their gilded cage alone. But all that cruelty, it was a shield, a way to hide how deeply insecure she really was. Without the Beaumont name and money, who was she? The thought was terrifying. So she propped up her fragile self-worth by putting down anyone she thought was beneath her. Pushing others down was the only way she knew how to feel tall. That cleaner on the side of the road wasn't a real person to her. She wasn't someone with a life or a family or feelings. She was just an opportunity for a quick laugh in the middle of a long, empty day. What Isabella didn't know, what she never could have guessed, was that her little show of cruelty didn't go unnoticed. A few cars behind her, stopped at a red light, was another vehicle. It wasn't a flashy sports car or a huge SUV. It was a modest, dark blue sedan, the kind you wouldn't look at twice. And inside that car sat Mr. Arthur Harrison. To anyone glancing over, Mr. Harrison looked like a retired professor, maybe a kindly grandpa. He had a gentle face lined from a life fully lived, and his eyes held a quiet, observant wisdom behind a pair of simple glasses. But that unassuming exterior hid the mind of a billionaire, a self-made man who had built a global empire on nothing but grit, smarts, and a moral compass that never wavered. Arthur Harrison saw it all. He saw Isabella's expensive car deliberately swerve. He saw the malice behind it. He saw the wave of mud swallow the poor woman. And he saw Isabella's ugly, triumphant laugh as she sped away. It wasn't just the act itself that filled him with a cold, quiet anger. It was how casual it was. The complete and total disregard for another person's dignity. It was a kind of poison he'd seen too many times among the rich, a spiritual sickness he couldn't stand. Mr. Harrison himself had come from nothing. He grew up in a small apartment just like Emma's. He remembered the sting of hunger and the shame of worn-out clothes. He had scrubbed floors to pay for his education. He knew the value of hard work and the weight of every dollar. He prized integrity and humility above all else because he'd built his life on them. What he had just witnessed was an offense to everything he believed in. But Mr. Harrison wasn't an impulsive man. He was a chess player, always thinking several moves ahead. As he drove away, he filed the incident away in his memory. Later that day, he called his executive assistant, a sharp and discreet woman named Carol. "Carol," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This morning, around 8:15 on Elm Street, a woman in a black Bentley license plate BELLA deliberately splashed a cleaner on the sidewalk. I want to know who that cleaner is. Find out everything you can about her." The report landed on his desk 2 days later. It was a slim file, but it told a powerful story. The cleaner's name was Emma Riley, single mother to a 7-year-old son, worked 2 jobs, had a perfect work record, and was respected by her colleagues for being hard-working and positive. The file also noted something incredible. One of her jobs was as a night cleaner at Harrison Tower, the flagship building of his own corporation. He had been employing this woman for 3 years and had never known it. The report also detailed what a nearby security camera had captured. It showed Emma's initial shock, but then it showed her walking to the park, her back straight. It showed her patiently cleaning her uniform. And it showed her arriving at Harrison Tower, late but composed, and immediately getting to work, her performance as flawless as always. As Mr. Harrison read this, he felt a deep sense of admiration. He realized that this woman, Emma, had a strength of character that money could never, ever buy. And Isabella represented a poverty of spirit that no amount of wealth could fix. In that moment, a plan began to take shape in his mind. It wasn't just a plan for charity, but for a reckoning. A plan to hold a mirror up to both women, to show them who they really were. And his plan was about to set something truly unimaginable in motion. A week later, Emma was finishing her shift when the building's facility manager, a stern man she hardly ever spoke to, walked up to her. "Miss Riley?" he said, his voice strangely formal. "My office. Now." Emma's heart sank. A cold dread, far worse than the muddy water, washed over her. This was it. She was being fired for being late that day. She had tried to explain, but the shame of it all had caught the words in her throat. She followed him down the long, polished hallway, her own reflection staring back at her from the floors she had just cleaned. Each step felt like a walk to the gallows. She sat in the chair across from his huge desk, her hands clenched in her lap, bracing herself. But what he said next wasn't what she was expecting at all. "Ms. Riley," he began, looking down at a memo. "It has come to our attention, that is, to the attention of the highest levels of this company, that your dedication and work ethic are exemplary." Emma just stared, confused. Was this some kind of sick joke? The manager cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable but following orders. "As such, we are pleased to offer you a new position, effective immediately. We are promoting you to head of hospitality services for the entire Harrison Tower." He pushed a folder across the desk. "You'll be managing the entire custodial and maintenance staff. It comes with a significant salary increase, full health benefits for you and your son, paid time off, and a corner office on the 25th floor. Emma was speechless. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Sir," she stammered, I think there's been a mistake. I'm just a cleaner." The manager looked up, and for the first time, a flicker of a real smile touched his lips. "There's no mistake, Emma. The memo says, and I quote, 'Someone very important noticed your character. Congratulations.'" Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison was setting the second part of his plan into motion. His company was sponsoring its annual charity gala, the Starlight Ball, the biggest event for the city's elite. He told his team to send a special invitation to Mr. and Mrs. Richard Beaumont, making sure they had a spot at the head table right next to the stage. For Isabella, this was the ultimate ego boost. an invitation to the most exclusive event of the year, seated with the great Arthur Harrison himself. She spent a fortune on a new gown, buzzing with excitement, completely unaware that she wasn't a guest of honor. She was the main exhibit. The night of the gala was a sea of glittering diamonds and rustling silk. Isabella was in her element, air-kissing people she barely knew and shooting judgmental glances across the room, her husband Richard beside her, looking proud. The moment came after dinner. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight found Arthur Harrison as he walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. He started his speech, his voice calm and steady, talking about how true charity isn't just about writing checks, but about basic human decency. "Tonight," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd, "we celebrate giving, but I want to talk about what it means to have true wealth. It's not in your stock portfolio or your bank accounts. True wealth is in your character." Isabella nodded along, feeling smug. "Recently," Mr. Harrison continued, "I witnessed an event that showed me both the ugliest poverty of spirit and the most profound richness of character. And the person who displayed that richness is with us tonight. She is a new and valued member of our corporate family." He paused. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the new head of hospitality for Harrison Tower, Ms. Emma Riley." A second spotlight hit a table near the back. Emma stood up, hesitant. Mr. Harrison had personally invited her and provided her with a simple but beautiful blue dress. She looked transformed, not by the clothes, but by the quiet confidence she now radiated. As she walked to the stage, a confused murmur rippled through the crowd. With Emma by his side, Mr. Harrison told the story. He didn't raise his voice. He just stated the facts. "I saw a woman on her way to work to earn an honest living, and I saw another woman in a car that costs more than most people make in a decade, deliberately and cruelly drench her in a shower of mud. And then she laughed." The ballroom was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Isabella froze. The wine glass in her hand trembled. Every drop of blood seemed to drain from her face. Her husband, Richard, turned and stared at her, a look of horrifying realization on his face. He'd heard her bragging to her friend about it on the phone, but had dismissed it as a nasty exaggeration. Now, in front of everyone, he knew it was true. Mr. Harrison looked directly at the head table, his gentle eyes now as hard as steel. He didn't need to point or say a name. Everyone in the room followed his gaze. Everyone saw Isabella's face, a mask of pure, unfiltered horror. The public shame was absolute, a spotlight far brighter and more burning than any on the stage. That day, Mr. Harrison concluded, his voice ringing with authority, I saw that true class has nothing to do with wealth. Emma, your grace under pressure is an inspiration. Welcome to the team. He shook her hand as the room, after a moment of stunned silence, erupted into thunderous applause. It was an applause for Emma and a verdict on Isabella. What happened after that night was swift and decisive. Emma, once invisible, was now seen. She blossomed in her new role. The salary and benefits were life-changing, of course. She bought Leo the new sneakers, and his smile was worth more than any fortune. But the real change was inside her. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. She managed her team with the same kindness and respect she had always wanted for herself, creating a work environment built on dignity. She became a quiet legend in Harrison Tower, a symbol of hope and a living reminder that character is the only currency that really matters. For Isabella, the fall from grace was just as spectacular as her former position was high. She became an instant social outcast. The friends who had once surrounded her now dodged her calls. The story became the scandal of the season, whispered in every exclusive club and salon in the city. But the biggest blow came from her own husband. Richard, a man who valued his public reputation above all else, was humiliated. He finally saw the ugliness in his wife's soul, and maybe a reflection of his own failures for letting it fester. He separated from her the next week. During the legal process, it became brutally clear that the mansion, the cars, the vast fortune, it was all in his name. He cut her off completely. Isabella Beaumont, the woman who had everything, was suddenly left with almost nothing. The unimaginable had happened. She, who had never worked a day in her life, now faced the terrifying reality of figuring out how to support herself, a world away from the luxury she had taken for granted. The splash of mud she had so casually created had turned into a tidal wave that came back and washed her own life away. Emma's story is one of those timeless lessons, isn't it? It shows that even when the world throws mud at you, it can't permanently stain a pure heart or break a resilient spirit. It reminds us that true worth isn't measured by what's in our wallets, but by the content of our character. The universe has its own way of balancing the scales, and sometimes justice is delivered not by a lightning bolt from the heavens, but from the quiet observation of a good person who decides to act. What do you think? Do you believe someone like Isabella, stripped of everything, can ever truly change and find redemption? Or is that kind of cruelty just baked into who a person is? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. If you want more stories like this, stories that touch your heart and maybe even inspire you, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.